This one. So it's just after the...
After the sermon?
After the
Okay.
Here. Through here. And then this is my sermon from here. Okay?
Yep.
Please feel free to join in the singing on all the numbers today. We're learning some new songs. 3, 4, 5.
Come, come, whoever you are. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here, whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears. You are welcome here. No matter what you have experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. You are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. I'm Brenda, and my pronouns are she and her. And welcome to everyone who's gathered in the sanctuary and also those who are watching us streaming at home, our virtual audience. Welcome. Our worship team today is Reverend Laura, myself, Rick Nobis, and John Allen with music. And we are so glad to be together. All the members of the worship team and the staff are fully vaccinated against COVID-19, and the singers are tested prior to Sunday. So we all get to sing, but we get to keep our masks on, and those who are unmasked have been tested, and we can feel good about that. Please do keep your mask all the way through the service. We'd like to extend an especially warm welcome to those who are here for the first time. So glad you're here and that you found us. If you'd like to get to know us more, we encourage you to fill out the connection card on your virtual order of service, or visit the welcome table toward the back after worship today. And there was a QR code as you came in, and that has the virtual order of service. It's also, the QR code is in that hardbound gray hymnal inside the cover if you need it. We have a religious exploration program for children and youth that meets weekly on Sundays and during worship, and our director is Rob Carlson and assistant Grace Burns, and I know Grace is here and maybe Rob is too, and they are happy to answer any questions if you have kids and you're new and you'd like to know more. There's a lot happening here at South Valley, and the Happenings Weekly newsletter is the best way to stay up to date. Thanks to Lori Quigley for that. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. And Just a couple of quick announcements. The fact is, Christmas is coming, and Christmas Eve service is how we're going to celebrate. So that will be at 6 p.m. And if you want to bring a dozen cookies and exchange them for a dozen other cookies, feel free to do that that evening. And then on the following Sunday, next week, don't come here. We're not going to be here, okay? We're going to have a Sabbath, we're going to have downtime, and come back to the new year refreshed, okay? So Christmas Eve and not next Sunday. Let us light our chalice now. I invite you to stand in body, mind, or spirit as we say our chalice lighting words and our actions if you'd like. And please stay standing after for the hymn. And as we say our words, we light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action.
Hymn 301. And we'll do 3 verses, the ones printed right here.
I am the Reverend Laura Young, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. It is good to gather. Even in the midst of a new wave of the variant, we can still gather together, socially distanced and masked, but still together. So joyfully, let us be in worship with one another, knowing that what worship is to dedicate ourselves to that which is worthy. And what could be more worthy than gathering as a community together at this time? And as we gather, let us also remember that we do so on the ancestral and current homelands of the Shoshone, the Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. As Unitarian Universalists, we acknowledge the complex and violent history that resulted in these lands being stolen from these people, and the cultural and physical genocide perpetuated against all members of those tribes at the hands of white colonial settlers. We commit ourselves to undoing these harms, and we seek to authentically and with honesty engage in the necessary work that will produce justice for those who have been disenfranchised, and that promotes healing for the whole of the earth and all its peoples. This morning, we honor the cycle of the seasons as we celebrate Winter Solstice here in North America. This marks the beginning of our winter season, a time when the earth is now the closest to the sun and our daylight hours are at their shortest. Our Southern Hemisphere siblings will honor the height of summer this week. For millennia, peoples all over the world have marked the passing of time via the cycle of the sun and the seasons. And while mostly we do not need to fear winter in the modern age, we are very much aware that this year, again, that the toll of the coronavirus has been terrible on our world. 5.3 million people have died in the last 2 years. We name this collective grief. And we knit a web of connection to one another that will see us through this most difficult time. It's a lot of people to hold. And their families too. The winter solstice is also a deeply spiritual time for many, many cultures. It is understood to be a time of deeper healing and introspection, that just as the earth rests under the blanket of snow and ice, the animals slumber in their nests and their dens, and the seeds in the soil gather and collect their energy for the spring that is to come. We too are invited to reflect, to rest, and to practice being fallow, turning our energy inward and letting the deep healing of the non-active growth guide our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. Spring will come, as it always does. But for today, we befriend the short days, the cold wind, and the snowy storms, as reminders that we too must allow the surface of our lives to rest in order to make room for that which is yet to take root, unfold, bloom, and bear fruit in our lives. And as a symbol of our collective commitment to honor the deep, we will now darken the sanctuary and extinguish our chalice. So they're mostly off. It's good. We have a lot of windows, so it's not quite that way. Perfect. And so now, for those who are young at heart or young in spirit, let us have a story. And this is a story of the solstice and how it came to be. It is taken from Circle Round by Starhawk and Diane Baker, and used by permission from the Unitarian Universalist Association. So young at heart, with your parents in your seats, circle around, maybe hold your parents' hand, and I'll tell you a story about when the sun was born again. It was the middle of winter, and the sun had grown very old. All year long, the sun had worked so hard, rising and setting all day, day after day. And all year long, the sun had fed everybody on the earth, shining and giving energy to the trees and the flowers and the grasses so they could grow and feed the animals and birds, insects, and people. All year, the sun's gravity held tight to the spinning ball of the earth and the twirling ball of the moon. And the 8 other whirling planets, maybe 9 if you love Pluto, which I do, until the poor sun was dizzy from watching it all. And now the poor, tired sun could barely make it up in the morning, just a very short time above the horizon and needing to sleep again. So the days grew shorter and the nights grew longer until the day was so short it was hardly worth getting up for. I felt that way during coronavirus. Night felt sorry for the sun. "Come to my arms and rest, child," said the night. "After all, I am your mother. You were born out of my darkness billions of years ago, and you will return to me when all things end. Let me cradle you now, as I shelter every galaxy and star in the universe." So night wrapped her great arms around the sun, and the night was very long indeed. "Why does the dark go on so long?" asked children all over the earth. "Won't the sun ever come back?" "The sun is very tired," the old one said, "but maybe if you children say thank you for all the things the sun does for us, the light may return in the morning." So the children sang their songs to the earth, the children of the earth sang their songs to the sun. They thought about all the things that the sun gave to them. "Thank you for growing lettuces and corn and rice and wheat. Thank you for growing the trees of the forest and the seaweed in the oceans," the children said, "and the krill that feeds the whales and the birds of the sky. Thank you for stirring the air and making winds that bring the rain and snow to us. And every time a child said thank you, the sun began to get a little warmer and a little brighter. Wrapped safely in the arms of night, the sun grew younger and younger. And at last, it was time for the children to finally go to bed. We will stay up and wait for the sun to rise again, the old one said. Can't we stay up too? The children asked. You can try, but you will be too sleepy, the old one said. But you can each light a candle because all fire is a spark of the sun's fire. Put your candle in a very safe place and let it stand vigil for you as you sleep and dream of the sun's return. So the children lit their candles and put them in safe places, and each flame was a little spark of the sun's fire. And the sun peeped out from between the arms of night and saw all the little fires and began to feel warmer and brighter and younger still. Early in the morning, the old ones woke the children, and together they climbed a high hill and faced to the east. No, to the east. To the east. I'm confused. I'm from California. They sang songs to the sun, because in Santa Barbara, the ocean is the south, so I'm always turned around. So they sang songs, though, from the top of that hill to the sun and ran around trying to keep warm. And they waited and waited to see if the sun would return that morning. And indeed, the sky turned from blue to indigo and grew lighter, and golden glow crept over the horizon, and night opened her great arms, and in a burst of brightness, the sun appeared new and strong and shining. For in the long night, the sun had rested well and grown young from the songs and the thanks of the children, young and as a brand new baby born out of night once more. And everybody celebrated, and the children jumped for joy. The sun has returned. The sun is reborn, the people cried. And they danced and sang to celebrate the birth of a new day, and they went home for pancakes. The end. Please join me in singing our children out to Children's Chapel.
This church, this community, and its many ministries are only made possible by the gifts that you all give, of your time, your talent, and your treasures. Many of us pledge monthly to support this work, and for this we are grateful. The gifts help ensure that we live our values of love and justice in the world. Part of our ministry at South Valley is sharing our Sunday worship offerings with an organization that aligns with our principles and values. And in loving memory of Connie Gates, one of our founding members, a fierce justice advocate, our Social Action Council has chosen the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee guest at your table program for our offering split for November and December. And this is a group dear to us that upholds the right of people displaced due to many different reasons. We think of them and we think of what we can give. Please join me in reading our offertory words. They are printed in the order of service. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sing it with our gifts. And we'll now accept the offering. For those at home, you're invited to use the giving link in the online order of service. And the ushers, please come forward to take the offering at this time.
We'll sing 1063, the Teal Book, for our offertory today.
For all that we have received and all that we have found the courage to give, may we be truly grateful. May these gifts be a blessing on South Valley and the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. All gathered here today are now invited to participate in a silent ritual of joys and sorrows. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you would like held in community, you are invited forward to come and place a stone in the water. Linger as you wish at the front, imbuing that stone with your care and your hope, and then place it in the bowl. This ritual is practiced in silence, both of those putting their stones in as those waiting in line. And during this time, John will share the gift of his music with us. Let us be in silence with one another. We will hold 3 minutes of silence.
I have to say, I was right there with the lamentations of the baby. Moving from joy to lamentation so quickly. Praise what comes, surprising as unplanned kisses. All you haven't deserved of days and solitude, your body's immoderate good health that lets you work in many kinds of weather. Praise. Talk with just about anyone. And quiet intervals. Books that are your food and your hunger. Nightfall and walks before sleep. Praising these for practice. Perhaps you will come at last to praise grief and the wrongs you never intended. At the end, there may be no answers and only a very few simple questions. Did I love? Finish my task in the world. Learn at least one of the many names of God. At the intersections, the boundaries where one life began and another ended, the jumping off places between fear and possibility, at the ragged edges of pain, did I catch the smallest glimpse of the holy? Thanks to Jean Lohman from the Light of Invisible Bodies.
Praise what comes. It's tall orders at any time in our living to praise what comes. And the question that comes for me is, what is praise? Can we praise continuously in the midst of hardship? And why would we do that? The promise in this poem that praise is a practice that bears fruit and perspective, hope and resiliency is something that we very much need these days. And the invitation, praise with me, she writes, and encourage others to join you. For the value of life, your life, mine, and our collective life is not measured in our achievements or in those grand gestures. Rather, it is developed in our care and connection with self and others and the wider world. Do not fret about what you will wear, it says in those Gospels, or what you will eat, for all will be well and all is provided. This poem promises that if we undertake the practice of praise, the practice of noticing what is good and expressing gratitude for it, we will create the conditions by which we and others may flourish in a world that is rather ambivalent about suffering. And by this, I mean to observe that suffering is an ever-present aspect of our lives, and none of us is protected from its arrival on our doorsteps. Suffering is not metered out according to what one can bear, nor is it distributed equally across time and place. So given this question, the question endures, how are we to deal with that reality? Our Buddhist siblings in faith are exceedingly clear about this reality, that suffering is inevitable and that there is a way through, and the way is through dedicated practice, such that we become less attached to our suffering and as somehow indicative of our worth and dignity. That we become less attached to our suffering as somehow an indication of our worth or dignity. However, practicing this within the American context of hyper-individualism is rather tricky. For too often, that teaching of letting go of attachment is interpreted as a call to be unattached to self, to go for it alone, and to be independent of self, others, and the world. It gets intermingled with that. When in fact, the practice of letting go of attachment is a call to love more deeply. And in fact, to be more attached in some ways to what is happening around you. It's a call to love more deeply, to love so deeply, in fact, that we experience a joy that then allows us to transcend the suffering and delivers us to a space of wholeheartedness, not unattachment, wholeheartedness. The goal, if you can use, excuse me for using that word because English is fairly limited, the goal is describing a process which is decidedly not achievement-oriented, but is to feel everything fully. To feel everything fully in our bodies and to emerge on the other side of each and every emotional cycle and experience with one's sense of wholeness, not just intact, but in fact enlivened and strengthened. Essential to this practice is observing the emotional cycles we are in or prone to, habitual cycles of negativity or anxiety, and to care for ourselves in those moments and others around us who may be on the receiving end of those perpetual cycles of anxiety. Not saying that I have that ever. That to treat one another with compassion, especially because sometimes our coping falls apart when we get to the edges of our personalities. But do not despair. When you are at the edge, that is also the moment where insight can enter in. For that moment of breakdown is that process where the light can break through. And if we continue to practice skills along the way when we're not in crisis, that insight door may be further opened. It's essential that we practice these skills of discernment, of being grounded. Call them spiritual practices, call them habits of mind, call them grounding things, whatever they are, whatever word works for you. Spiritual practice is essential, especially in a time like this when the world seems cattywampus and to be changing rapidly underneath our feet. And by spiritual practice, I don't mean just those things that you enjoy doing, or those things that take you out of your normal. By spiritual practice, I mean something that you select specifically and intentionally for its ability to help you train your mind, your body, your soul, and your heart to be connected. For some people, that is meditation. For others, it's a form of prayer. Still others may find singing or hiking or other forms of spiritual practice, such as art, to be useful. The key is that you do it with intention, that you do it on purpose. I cannot emphasize that more strongly. I know it is a sort of broken record that I emphasize in this community that you have to do your spiritual practice. And by that I mean I have to do my spiritual practice. I have to meditate. I have to ground. Because otherwise, how can we be together at our best? How can we, if we don't do this, tackle the complex stressors of our current context and transform them from anxiety-provoking states of overwhelm into opportunities for collaboration and collective liberation? The Buddha, as you may know, was not an apolitical person. He was, in fact, very political. And he spoke very much in his context and in time and his place in the world against the forces that would diminish human efficacy and the hope for a more just and loving world. Thus, when I speak to you and invoke the Buddha, I want you to understand that spiritual practice is also a tool of enlivening the democracy that we are living in. You do it not just for yourself, you do it for this community and for the democracy that we so deeply care about. And that is, in fact, imperiled at this time. The purpose of checking in with ourselves of engaging in this spiritual practice is a hedge against checking out, which is the other option. We can either check in or we can check out, right? We can check into our spirit, we can check into our bodies, we can inhabit and enliven and fulfill our bodies, or we can just be absent, numbed out, distracted, on Facebook for endless periods of time. You've all had that happen, right? Where you scroll through Facebook promising you're only going to be on for 2 minutes, and then it's 35 minutes later, and you wonder how many cat videos you may have watched. We would do well for ourselves and one another to stay present in this moment. I know that we are tired of this pandemic, but the pandemic is not tired of us. We are tired of the pandemic, but the pandemic is not tired of us. So spiritual practice can be part of what undergirds us at this time and holds you close, keeps you vigilant, and keeps you alive, because that is the goal, is to stay alive through the pandemic. It cannot be any more clear than that. I want each of us to emerge on the other side, not just spiritually whole, but physically present in this building. The invitation to engage fits nicely with this turning of the seasons as marked by winter solstice. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, again, it is the time when the light is less and the darkness is more, a time set aside for resting and for allowing the unconscious self, the wildness, so to speak, that is at the center of our being to emerge quietly and to investigate what has happened in the year past. The inner heart self is co-located with our physical hearts. So I invite you to notice how much darkness surrounds the heart. Ideally, the physical heart is never exposed to external light. It is protected by skin and muscles and ribs because it is the core of our being. And such is also the metaphysical and the spiritual heart. It lives and thrives in the deep of our bodies. The most active energy of the world is actually starting to happen now. It's easy to imagine that it is the spring that is where all the energy is, but that is the final stage of the energy cycle. Right now, the seeds are resting underneath the earth, and they are at their most busy right now, gathering nutrients, gathering resources, gathering the ability to then be able to push up through the snow to blossom and bloom and bear fruit. Now is the time when we collect and we nurture the energy within us. If we hope in the springtime to also follow that cycle. And it's true that the pandemic is a kind of confusing these natural order of these cycles because stress is an ever-present reality of our life. We don't feel like it's okay to rest right now. Our adaptation to the new variants, to the stressors of the holidays, is kind of confusing to that soul self at the heart of our being. 23 months is a long time to endure collective uncertainty. And it's possible and seemingly probable that we have a while longer yet to endure. And for those of us, of course, who follow the science, which is everybody in this room, it can feel especially frustrating and disheartening to watch our brothers and our sisters who remain committed to being unvaccinated, to watch them sicken and to pass and to put a burden on the hospital system, because we know that we are equally tired as they are of dealing with the pandemic. But let me say, it is always a tragedy when somebody dies of COVID, whether they were vaccinated or not. And it is really difficult to stay connected to that when our frustration is high. Because we know often that there is a lot that we could have done differently and better. It is always a tragedy to watch preventable death. And that's a complex feeling. Hence again, spiritual practice will be the thing that gets you through. Taking some time to be quiet in the morning, to read before you open the news on your phone, to calligraphy or doodle, to just sit and breathe. And if you're not in a practice right now and you feel like you don't have time, just start with 30 seconds. Just sit on your couch for 30 seconds and do nothing. Let that be enough to start. And if you've been doing this for 15 or 20 years, then you have a good practice in place. But just start with the 30 seconds. And remember, you can always start again. It's never too late to start again. When we stay centered and focused, we will be able to move through the whole of the emotional cycle and stay connected to our own humanity and that of others. That is both the challenge and the opportunity of this pandemic, to stay connected to our humanity and that of others. We must trust that nothing lasts forever. The Buddha taught us not to focus on the weather, but to focus on the limitless sky behind the clouds and the daily weather. Because it is our nature, fundamentally, that is reflected in the limitless sky. We too are vast and limitless, not just on the outside, but inside as well. And I'll close with this. If you're unsure where all this energy for renewal will come from, take a hint from the snow that fell earlier this week. Snow is potential energy, stored up in the form of frozen crystals that melt ever so slowly, giving us just enough and then a bit more to quench our thirsty souls. It quenches the dry ground and then replenishes the deeper aquifers. Let our souls also be that. Take a sip and let your body be replenished on the deepest levels. Rest and receive the gift of stillness. Because when the mother says you have to stay still, as she did earlier this week, it's a good idea to be still so that our earth soul can guide us through the long nights ahead. May it be so, and amen. We will now close this time of solstice by reigniting our chalice and lightening the sanctuary. With this act, we accept the seeds of renewal into our hearts, and we rest in the hand of the sacred that knows full well what we most need and delivers us to the new shores to come in the spring. Before we close this morning, we have a very important moment of recognition to make. If I could be joined up at the chancel by Cindy Martin, our retiring administrator, as well as Mac Lund and Kathleen Luck, and Melissa, if she'd like to join as well, you may come.
Would like to thank you for all the wonderful years and all the dedication you've shown to us. And it's going to be hard, new change. The anxiety you talked about, I always had spiritual, I'd call Cindy or come see her and she'd have the answer for me. So it's going to change. But we want to give you this plaque to remember us by. It's for your dedication to our community and to thank you for your service. And enjoy retirement, but be careful on your bike.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you. We have some gifts for you.
You want me to pull this for you? That's a nice opening. Ooh, somebody's been knitting or crocheting.
So Cindy, in addition to being our administrator, was part of our prayer shawl, which knits blankets for those who are sick or have had a new baby or an occurrence in their life. So this is a shawl knitted for you by the prayer shawl as a parting gift. We hope it keeps you warm. It looks fabulous.
It does.
Great choice color.
Colors.
And there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Maybe come forward to people on this one.
Thank you. This is a knitting bag, in case anybody's wondering.
It's a knitting bag. Cindy loves to knit, and we hope you will enjoy it for years to come.
My favorite color, purple. The people here know me well.
We do. You will be missed.
They had to stand.
Yeah. Please remain standing. We're going to now sing our closing hymn, number 1031, May You Be Filled with Loving Kindness, and I invite you to sing to Cindy.
May you be filled. One more verse with we.
And let us now extinguish our chalice, and I will give Cindy the honor of extinguishing the chalice this morning. You are invited to say, and you can stand if you want, a lot of standing and sitting right now, to say our chalice extinguishing words with me. They're in your order of service. Perhaps you also know them by heart. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. We hold each other and Cindy in our hearts until we meet again.
Sing along if you know it. 2, 3, 5.
Remain standing for the benediction. May the gifts of solstice, which arrives now and in the week to come, deep and well within you, may you trust that all is well, all has already been well, and all will continue to be well. Happy solstice. May you be blessed and go forth now in peace, but stay for Cindy's party as well.